Well, in this segment, we are going to spend about 30 minutes to talk about the conflict resolution. I want to first address to Mr. Garcetti. I really appreciate that early on you disclosed about the personal experience, especially about your son who dates an Asian American woman. And I sometimes wonder, would that make it much easier, the multicultural, if there's an interracial relationship? You know, people try to understand and accept. At this point, I'd like to come back to your professional. I'm curious about what kind of resource within the district attorney office that promotes the conflict resolution.
There are various parts of our office. As I said, it's a very large office. There are over 3,700 employees in the district attorney's office in Los Angeles. We have what we call somewhat of a conflict resolution situation involving adults, not young people, juveniles. If in fact, let's say there's neighbors who are not getting along and they don't seem to understand that for example, in the Persian or the Philippine community, when they have a dinner, it doesn't begin at 6 o'clock in the evening, it begins 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and maybe they party long into the night, just having a good time, nothing wrong. And so there's loud noise and music, and so they're filing complaints, and the police come, and the police say, you know, you're making too much noise. Rather than prosecute, they may refer both sides to our office, and we'll sit down with them and said, well, let's talk about this. You have to understand that from where they come from, when they have a party, it doesn't start at 6 or 7 o'clock. It may start later. So how can we accommodate one another? And it works very well. So that's one tiny example. The most, I guess, common example, however, if you're really talking about problems that my office sees, involves crimes. And now let's go back to hate crimes, if I might. We have the authority to prosecute anytime the evidence establishes, one, that a crime was committed, and two, that a particular individual is responsible for that crime. Let's say that we have a youngster who has been going to a neighbor. The neighbor's house, black people there. The youngster is a white boy, and he is writing graffiti, racial slurs, let's say. That's all he is. Say that he is 14 years of age. He has committed a crime, vandalism, the graffiti. Now, we can say we're not going to do anything, or what most likely we're going to say, we will start the criminal charges against him. The parents must come in, work with us, and then we want the court, said we want you to find this youngster guilty of the vandalism, but let us work with him through the probation department, so that this youngster can learn, again, the tolerance that is necessary. What is it about the black people that you didn't like? Maybe you didn't understand it. So we must work within that framework. We have another situation where we can go with an adult when it's like that. We can place that person on probation if he agrees to go to counseling, where maybe through the Museum of Tolerance or through the ADL or some other group, that person, as an adult now, begins to learn tolerance through appreciating what ethnic difference means, what religious differences mean, and why, again, we should accept those rather than reject them. Now, the ultimate, of course, where we put all of that aside is when there is violent crime involved. We had a situation not too long ago that involved some young men who went in and desecrated a Jewish cemetery, knocked over the headstones, wrote horrible things about it. Now, no one was injured there, but this was an 18-year-old who had had a history. In that situation, what I'm going to do is my first concern is punishment here so that the community can be protected from him, and hopefully that punishment will send a deterrent message to others that we will not tolerate this. At the same time, when we see that this is going on in a particular community of Los Angeles, we will call the Human Relations Commission, we will call our Hate Crimes Division. Let's go in there. Let's work with the communities. Let's work with the, not just the police, but with temples, with schools, with churches, with mosques. Let's get the message out. We have a hot problem here. Let's work it to prevent further crimes.
It sounds like it's indeed, actually, it's really resourceful, and you wear many hats, as a mediator, as educator, and to provide all the resources and collaborating with the broader systems.
Oh, and we do. I mean, just yesterday, for example, I was with the Greater Asian Pacific Foundation. No district attorney had ever been there before. And I said, there's something that we can do, but we have to be able to bridge. And that means I have to hire more ethnic minorities to help me bridge into the respective communities, because there are cultures and things that you may do that are now against the law in this country. And you may be the victim of crimes. Immigration fraud in the Chinese American community, for example, is rampant. It's horrible. And we have to do something about it. But the only way we can learn is by talking to people in the community.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Next, I would like to address my question to Councilman. Earlier you mentioned that one of the key factor or deterrent factor to multicultural harmony is a fear of change and lack of understanding, and it doesn't want to involve and participate in the society. I wonder if you could take South Pasadena, for example, as a city, local government, what kind of activity or ideas you would promote for people, the citizens in your residents in your city could get involved and promote the multicultural understanding, eventually achieve multicultural harmony?
I think we have talked about this working together, getting to know each other better, understand each other better many times, and this is indeed the key. And as an elected city official, former mayor and council member, what I have done is truly to bring the Asian Americans to the so-called mainstream, and also to bring the non-Asians to the Asian communities. By means of what? For example, we all know that in each city there are city commissions. And in a small city like South Pasadena, there are 10 city commissions. And I'm happy to say that I have appointed Asian Americans to serve on each one of those commissions. So today, if you go to that little town of South Pasadena, you will find Asian representation on each commission. Not only that, out of the 10 commissions, 4 of them, the chairman or chairwomen are Asian Americans. Now, I have also advocated how important it is that we have to so-called mingle with the mainstream. And therefore, the South Pasadena Chinese American Club, every year they participated in the July 4th parade. That's a good example. Likewise, I have invited the city folks, elected officials, police chief, fire chief to the Asian events, such as the Moon Festival, such as the Chinese New Year events, so they will get to know each other better and appreciate each other better. I think while you're working together, living in the same community, ultimately what you are seeking is the understanding and appreciation of each other.
So it sounds like as a city councilman, you try to provide and facilitate, provide opportunity for people to get to know each other.
That's correct.
Different activities.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
I'd like to address the question to Dr. Suzuki. Earlier we talked about the diverse campus. I imagine including also the faculty members, the staff, and it's per se it's a society already. I wonder what kind of resources are available on campus to help to resolve any conflicts happening on campus.
We have many resources. As I was listening to Councilman Z, it struck me that a university campus like Cal Poly Pomona is very much like a small town like South Pasadena, and in fact the diversity of our campus is really a reflection of the diversity of the surrounding communities. Fortunately, as an educational institution, we do have many resources for dealing with these kinds of issues. I think two things are really key. Number one is education, and number two is communication. And in a manner similar to what Councilman Z has described, when we do have conflicts, and those are rather rare, but there might be a conflict between two student groups of different ethnicity, we have people on campus who can work with those two groups, bring them together, talk things out, and we can usually resolve the issues. As I mentioned earlier, we have many programs on campus to promote multicultural harmony. We have a multicultural center. We have a multicultural council where the various student leaders of the different groups come together to talk about different issues, to mount mutually beneficial activities. We have a cross-cultural retreat every year where we take maybe 100 students, faculty, and staff off somewhere to really talk about these issues, and many, many other programs. So we have a richness of programs and activities to really promote greater unity and harmony on the campus, and I think that's been a very important part of why we haven't had any major incidents on campus. So I've been pleased with that.
I think that's convenience being an education institute. You got a resource right there, right?
Yes, yes.
And so far we've been hearing from three different types of community. And next I would like to ask Venerable Master, as a religious and spiritual leader in the world, you have to work with people, disciples from different cultures, different societies. I wonder if you could give us some idea about how can different group of people work together from a religious perspective.
佛教是个教义，所有宗教也都是教义。如何教导信徒，跟这个社会和谐相处，这就是教育这个宗教教育的目的就达到了。这个里面最重要的一个理论的基础，就是肯定多元文化。我讲经的时候常常告诉大家，多元文化是事实，多元文化决定或能够否定。为什么？从我们人本身就是多元文化。我们眼是一个族群，耳是个族群，鼻是个族群。我们这个身体许许多多器官组织，每一个器官功能不相同，但是个个都第一。眼是见第一，耳是听第一，鼻是嗅第一。如果大家要争第一，我第一你第二，互相矛盾，身体就生病，甚至于身体就死亡。这个本身就是多元，社会也是多元，世界是多元的，宇宙是多元的。所以肯定多元是真理，多元是真实智慧。从这个基础上，我们建立信心、信念，然后如何去推行。
Buddhism is an education, and all education, the goal of it is to promote harmony between ourselves and our environment and other people around us. And so as a religious leader, I also teach my followers to stress on working on promoting peace with their neighbors and with the society they live in. And the most important point that has to be stressed is that pluralism or multiculturalism is really a reality, a fact. That if you look at it from a theoretical basis, or if you think of it in terms of analogy, that our body itself, it's made of multiple parts. We have eyes, we have ears, we have nose, we have bones. We have each one of these body parts has its uniqueness and has its value. So if you think of that as multicultural, each ethnic group has their own individual values. So one of the problem arises when each individual parts of our body, if we can make the analogy that the eye feels try to stress it's more important than the ears. If you think of that in terms of ethnic groups, then we can't have one ethnic group being more important than the other. They're all important to the overall functioning of the society. Much the same thing with our physical body. So in this sense, we have to teach people to realize this fact that pluralism or multiculturalism is really the only way and it's only fact. And you can see this in everything that we have.
那么，正如同我们一个身体每一个器官，它都能够互相合作。那么，我们对这个社会上不同的国家、不同的族群、不同的宗教，就跟对我们身体不同的器官一样，要密切的合作，互相尊重，互相了解，互相协助，这个社会就能调和。所以我们在新加坡这2年来，我说不但我们要研究佛教理论经典，我们要落实，把经典里面所告诉我们，通通去做到啊！所以我们主动访问每一个宗教，帮助每一个宗教啊，他们办养老院、办孤儿院、办社会福利的事业，我们尽心尽力的帮助他啊，主动的去帮助他。就新加坡新闻界、媒体介绍很多，从来没有其他宗教帮助别的宗教。啊，我们首先开这个例子，就2年当中，现在新加坡9个宗教团结成一家，彼此互相在金钱上都互相帮助，人力物力呀，整合来用，对这个社会产生了安定啊和平，带来了真正的光明的希望。
Much like the analogy of the body and its various parts, if we look at different nations and think of it as different parts of our body, then it's very crucial that we have a harmonious cooperation between them for the whole body to function and for the whole human society to function as a whole in a healthy way. What I have been promoting in Singapore is a coming together of different religious groups. And we have 9 religious groups, and that we have various activities, and we bring them together with a common goal, either to support charity events or building a convalescent homes, and various activities. We even share our financial resources, and this is perhaps a very rare example where one religion actually helps out the other religion, and the 9 different religion groups got together and worked as a whole, and we accomplished a lot. And this has been reported also in Singapore. So it's really important that the sense of cooperation, that either in religious groups or ethnic groups be spread, this message be spread, and so that people realize the importance of cooperation in promoting harmony. And I think that will bring a long-lasting peace to this to our society.
所以在佛教里面，我们综合佛教所讲，归纳到最后，我结论20个字啊，我们存心用什么样的心待人接物？真诚心，不怕别人欺骗我，别人欺骗我们是他的事情，我用真诚心对他。时间久了，他就会改变。啊，我们用亲近心、平等心、爱心来对待。啊，时间长了的时候，总是要有时间，要有耐心，才能够感化一切人。啊，不同的意见、反对的意见，到最后都赞同，都能跟我们和睦相处。啊，自己必须要真正把自私自利的念头断掉，不要想自己。处处为别人想，想别的宗教，想别的族群，为他想，为他谋福利。啊，我们自己做一个义务的工作者，那谁不能欢，谁不欢迎呢？谁不愿意接受呢？如果我们自己有利益在里面，这个就产生问题。啊，我们自己只利益别人，不利益自己，天下就太平。这个就是佛法的教训。我们认真努力把它弄好。
And in order to promote this coming together, the spirit of cooperation, we really have to cultivate within ourselves a sense of, a heart, an honest heart, and love, and a sense of equanimity. And we have to devote a lot of time and patience into this work. And even people who initially don't agree with our point of view, or people who can't seem to open their heart to come into cooperation with us, through time and patience, and through all those various faculties, such as honesty, love, equanimity, we can bring them into our group and bring them into this whole community. And if one of the key points is that we have to let our ego down. We have to take our own private desires. We have to let go of our own sense of gaining profits or gaining benefits for ourselves. Once we drop that attitude and we reach out to other people, who wouldn't want people to help them? Who wouldn't want people that is purely there to help without any sense of gaining something for themselves? And I think if you have that kind of attitude when you go and reach out to our people, eventually you turn all people around. And this is the spirit of Buddhism, and this is the spirit of compassion that's been taught by Buddha and many other religions.
所以在今年的过年，我过了很多个年，我参加这个天主教的平安夜的弥撒，我们所有佛教徒出家人统统都参加，大概也是世界上头第一次这么多出家人穿的服装很整齐，参加他们的平安夜我们参加印度人过年、马来人过年、回教过年、印度教过年，所以在这1、2个月当中，我过了很多个年，是吧？所以彼此互相往来，比亲兄弟还要亲热。所以这个社会也看到了，新加坡政府看到了，非常欢喜。
And this year is a very interesting year because I have participated in multiple New Year celebrations. So we've been to a Catholic Mass during the New Year's Eve where people from our monastery participated in their events. We went to the Hindu temples. We also went celebrated with Malaysians in their New Year. So really we're getting so close with all these different ethnic groups that we feel like even closer than brothers. So there's a sense of brotherhood among all people.
所以宗教的团结、种族的和睦不是理想，是可以做得到的。
Multicultural harmony is not an ideal. It's a real possibility.
在底下这个新的1000年当中，我们大家要共同努力。
We have to put our efforts in the new millennium.
Thank you very much. I think given the time that we know that Mr. Gassetti is going to leave us in a few minutes, and I just like to address, it seems like this segment we have emphasized over and over again the importance of education. And when you as a leader, I think there's also the responsibility almost like an educator, and just how do you use the power wisely. I would like to hear from Mr. Gassetti your suggestion or recommendation for being a leader. How can you promote the society harmony and multiculturalism?
Let me tell you exactly what we are doing. Again, it goes beyond the realm of prosecuting crime, reacting after a crime has been committed. My office has an enormous amount of authority, power, if you want to use that word. Maybe prestige is a good word to use too. So when we go knocking on doors, it's different than a citizen who knocks on the door. If you say you're from the district attorney's office, people are going to ask you, yes, what can I do? We've taken that authority, prestige, and power, for example, into the San Fernando Valley. We have formed an alliance there that's going to be announced within 2 weeks. We have been working very hard for many weeks to form an alliance through churches, temples, mosques, through various community organizations, through active citizens and groups, to form what I refer to as a hate crimes coalition. That we will be able to marshal our forces together to make the district attorney's office even stronger than it is by getting the community involved, so that we can go into schools, we can go into communities when we see that there could be a potential problem there, and let's start working on it right now. But we're not going to even wait that long. What we're going to do, and I think what everyone has to do, is start working today to break down the cultural barriers. As we see a larger and larger immigrant community coming in, for example, to the San Fernando Valley that was, quote, a white, end quote, community, there is this need to educate everyone. And the burden isn't simply on the, quote, white person, end quote. It is also on the ethnic minority to understand what the expectations of this new community that you're coming into, what the laws are, what the mores are. And so this is a huge undertaking. But I willingly do this because I know that our work is going to result in fewer crimes and more smiles on people's faces. This is what any leader has to do. Too few do it, but I want to use the district attorney's office to accomplish the goal. I mean, you have an excellent city council person with us today from South Pasadena who's exhibited the same, I think, vision and enthusiasm. And I know that the president from Cal Poly Pomona, he is as concerned as I am to working with young people and others and breaking through those cultures, because you see 3 different ethnic minorities in the 3 of us right now. But we are working together. We work together well. We can do this at non-governmental, non-high official level to get people and communities involved.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
This set a good role model, even a metaphor here.
Indeed.
Thank you. So I guess we're going to take a 2-minute break, then we'll come back into the first segment.
I apologize for having to leave, but it's a very busy schedule I have. And thank you very much for the opportunity to be with you. And it's a special honor for me to be with the Venerable Master and with each of you. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, in the last segment, we've been discussing about different ways to work on and promoting multiculturalism in the society and in our own social groups. And what I heard from our panelists has been like something like mutual understanding is very important. Promoting the communication is very important. Helping different people to have access to the resources is very important. I wonder if are these the prerequisites of multiculturalism, or do you feel like there are other additional conditions that we have to meet before, or to make it easier for people to achieve multiculturalism? I wonder if Councilman Z, would you address this?
Well, in this section of the discussion, I guess I would be using a lot of P's. The reason is I think we all agree by now that we need to understand each other better, we need to work together, and the key word is education. Now, in this sense, I like to offer that the 2 P's we have to keep in mind, and they are persistence and also patience. Education is not something you want to say it today and then it's going to happen tomorrow. Education takes time, and it's going to take long time. Hopefully, through successful education, the new immigrants 10 years from now will become old immigrants. And therefore, other than making the money to feed their family and also to building up the more zeros in their bank account, they will find the time and resources to serve the community, so to speak, getting involved. And hopefully, in 10, 15 years, the children today will become parents. And therefore, today they may hear some kind of racial statements or comments by saying that, I really want you to marry nobody but only Chinese Americans. This kind of resistance may go away, because 10, 15 years from now, if they receive the kind of education that we want them to receive, they would become parents, and they would not be telling the same thing to their children. The last P I like to offer Unfortunately, this is not as positive as the previous two P's. That is, be practical. What I'm trying to say is like this. This type of resistance or rejection will always be there. This is nothing but human nature. Now, I was born in Shanghai, and then I grew up in Hong Kong. I remember when I went to Hong Kong some 50 years ago, there were a lot of resistance, rejections by Hong Kong people to Shanghainese. Today, if you go to Shanghai, and if you don't speak Shanghainese, let's say if you're from Canton or Hong Kong, even though we are all Chinese, people will look at you and say, which planet are you from? So this is nothing but human nature. If you are different, people will have some kind of resistance to you. Is it bad? Sure. Can we totally eliminate it? No. I guess the answer will be no. So by being practical is to accept this and say that's perfectly fine. Perhaps you have a different culture. Perhaps I don't understand you now, but through time, through this persistence and also the patience, you can get to learn about each other better, understand each other better, and therefore you can come to the very conclusion, and that is to appreciate each other.
I think the 3 P's are very important and very practical. And indeed that it does take time for this to happen. It won't happen just like that in a second. And in the college is a major educational institution, and that's what you designed for your students to learn, to educate, and to hopefully grow up to be more tolerant and more well-rounded people. And earlier, Dr. Suzuki, you have mentioned that one important factor is that access to the resources, and whether there's limited resources or the limited amount of resources. And having that in mind, as a college president, I wonder, how do you promote that? How do you help facilitate that students from different groups have either equal access, and what's your definition of equal access to the limited amount of resource?
Let me share a story with you about an experience I had 5 or 6 years ago. I was talking to a group of our faculty and talking about the importance of diversity, about the importance of multiculturalism. And I made the statement that I really thought we needed to diversify our faculty more, that we needed to hire more faculty from various groups. And a faculty member who was at the meeting raised his hand and he said, I'm troubled by what you are saying, President Suzuki, because I've always been involved with helping students from all ethnic groups. And you seem to be saying that I'm no longer going to have a role in helping these students, that you need to have minority faculty counseling minority students. I said, well, no, that's not really what I'm saying. And I shared a story with him. I said, at my previous institution, when I arrived there, I discovered they had this large counseling center with about 30 professional counselors, but there was not a single Asian counselor there. And I questioned them about it because we had maybe 15% of the students were Asian students. What they told me was, well, we see very few Asian students coming here, and we don't think they have that many problems. And I said, well, I wouldn't bet on that. And I kept pushing them for another couple of years until they finally hired their first Asian counselor. Well, guess what? In about 3 months, this counselor was overwhelmed with Asian students. And by the end of the year, she was so overloaded that she was staying at work till 8 or 9 o'clock every night. So she finally went to the director of the center and said, you've got to help me. I can't keep this up. You're going to either have to hire another Asian counselor, or you're going to have to allow me to cross-train some of the other counselors. Well, they decided on the latter course, and so she cross-trained them and told them the kinds of problems they could expect from Asian students and how she has counseled them. And so she redistributed her load of Asian students. And they were able to counsel them almost as effectively as she was able to. And I told them the moral of this story is, number one, that by diversifying the staff by just that small amount, the center was able to improve its services markedly and to serve a much broader student population. And the second moral of the story I told him was that by diversifying the staff by that small amount, it really brought a lot of additional expertise to the entire staff. And I said, in the same way, by bringing in more diverse faculty, these faculty in turn can work with you to be able to more effectively serve a broader segment of the students and raise the excellence and the quality of the education that we are providing. So what we have tried is to really pursue a policy of inclusion, so that when we say we're diversifying, that doesn't mean others are excluded. We really try to bring them in, and I think that's one of the keys to really developing harmony.
Thank you. It's very interesting. In our center, we experience exactly the same.
I'm sure, yes.
Before we did outreach to the Asian community, people would think that, oh, Asians are fine.
No problem.
No problem. Asian students are AAA, Asian Americans, so they all get A's. They don't have problem. But as soon as we do some outreach to schools, outreach to families, we feel and we experience overwhelming need in the community. So I think it's very important that both the councilmen trying to increase the representation of different ethnic background in your different 10 communities, and by diversifying the faculty would be helping the people from different background, different social backgrounds to voice make their voice being heard.
Right.
Very important. Earlier, the Master has told us one very important concept is equality and purification. And I wonder, in addition to Buddha's definition about equality, how can we apply that to our society? What's your idea of equality, and how can we achieve that?
佛法所说的完全是社会迫切需要的问题，所以真正深入了解佛法之后，才知道佛法是生活教育。佛法教我们怎么生活，怎么过日子，怎样工作，怎样处事待人接物，字字句句都讲的是现实。 决定没有脱离我们的生活去谈玄学，那个不是佛法，那不是真智慧。
Buddhism has always been an education about our daily lives. It has always taught us how to conduct ourselves in our daily life, how to go to work, how to live a decent life, how to relate to other people in our everyday life. So that is the reality, and that is what Buddhism addresses. If we think of Buddhism purely as a discussion, a philosophical discussion on the mental level, and not as a practical teaching with application in our daily life, that's a big mistake.
前些年，我有一个机会，在中国北京访问北京师范大学，校长陪同我。 我在学校校园里面看到一块牌子，上面写了8个字：“学为人师，身为示范。”身体是世间人的模范。我跟校长说：“我说这8个字，就是佛所说的‘大方广佛华严经’。”他非常惊讶，他说：“这8个字是我们全校老师共同拟定的。”我说：“这8个字。” 就是整个 这个大乘佛法精神之所在。那佛法教我们什么呢？最普通的讲法，大家都是很熟悉的，所以说6个原则啊，在佛经里面叫6波罗蜜啊。那波罗蜜是圆满，6种圆满。第一种啊叫布施，布施是什么意思？用现代的话来说，为人民服务，为社会服务，为世界人服务，这个叫布施。第2条啊叫持戒，持戒的意思，用现在的话说就是守法，不但要遵守法律，要遵守每一个族群、每一个国家他们的风俗习惯、道德观念啊，你通通都要遵守，入境随俗。第3个忍辱，这是讲耐心，这大家讲，没有耐心不能成就，要有很大的耐心，很长远的耐心，我们才能把这个为大家服务。我们替他服务也有耐心，没有耐心他不接受不行啊，是啊，不接受咱慢慢等机缘呐，啊，所以一定要有耐心。第4个叫精进，精进是求进步，啊，永远不断的追求进步。第5个禅定，啊，禅定是自己心有主宰，不会受外面境界动摇，啊，不会受外面境界诱惑，这个叫禅定，啊。第5个叫智慧，对于人生宇宙的真相清清楚楚、明明白白，一点都不迷惑，这个叫般若智慧。这是佛教学生呢，一定要做到这6个原则。这6个原则真正做到了，这什么问题都能够做得很圆满了啊！所以和平2个字，我们加以简单的注解，大家和睦相处，平等对待，和平才能落实。如果我们单讲和睦相处，里面存在不平等，这个和平是假象，不是真实的啊！一定要平等对待。
Recently, I visited, a few years back, I visited Beijing University. The name of the university is to train students to be teachers, future teachers. And I met with the president of the university, and I see a plaque in the front of the school entrance. And it says, I'm translating here, that you should learn to be the teachers of your peers, and you conduct yourselves as a model of the world. And I told the president that this is precisely the teaching, the principle in the Flower Adorned Sutra that the Buddha has expounded. And and he was very surprised that because those 8 words in Chinese that they come up with is really something that just the teacher got together and believed and put together as the principle and the guiding principle of their education institution. And I would like to say a little bit about what Buddha has said about the 6 perfections. The first of these things that we have to put into practice is the art of giving. We provide service to our neighbors, we provide service to our societies. In service, that's how we put our ideals into action. And the second perfection is discipline. Without some kind of discipline and holding the precepts, we will not be able to live peacefully in any society. So holding the precept or having discipline in our daily life means whichever society we become a member to, we have to observe their local custom, we have to observe their culture, and then we have to fit ourselves into it to become a peaceful existing member of that society. That's the true meaning of holding the precepts. And the third quality is patience. And as we both discussed before, as we all discussed before, that patience is really an ingredient, key ingredient to provide service, because it takes time to make changes, and we really have to have that persistence and that drive. And the fourth perfection is called diligence. That is our active without active interest in studying various religious practices or spiritual practices where we elevate ourselves as well, elevating people around us. And the fifth perfection is meditation, the right meditation, and where we have to really bring our mind, our heart, and our emotion and center that within ourselves so that we do not be distracted, will not be distracted by the various chaos that we see around us in the society. We really have to have that centering of the mind and the calming of the mind. This last perfection, which depends on the previous five, is that we have to really have gained a true insight and understanding of all physical phenomena and all psychological phenomena. That's true wisdom. With that wisdom, with the last perfection, we can solve all the problems in the world. And so to answer the question of how do we promote peace? Well, we have to actualize peace. Instead of talking about it, we have to take actions. And those six perfections are the actions that we can take. And then the result is true peace and true equanimity. So whether you think of it as a Buddhist concept or not, that's how we're supposed to go. That's how we should go about it.
Thank you. I think before we go for our conclusion, I just have a question I'd like to ask about, like early on, Dr. Suzuki, you mentioned about you as an advocate to recommend this diversify the staff on the campus, which reflect the society here. I'm also curious about you as an individual. You know, when we emphasize the importance of education, how do you self-educate yourself? I think that'll be nice for us to hear from your own experience. Just give us an example so we can look at you as a role model. So could you make a comment about that? How do you self-actualize, educate yourself the importance of multiculturalism, and how do you do that?
Well, if I may refer to a little story which I often share with the others. Back in 1989, a friend of mine, and she was running for school board. And so all of the Asian Americans were all really excited. You know, we were at a committee meeting talking about our strategy and tactics and everything. All of a sudden, a third-generation Chinese American, a person who does not speak one word of Chinese, who cannot even write his name in Chinese, make a comment by saying that, are you sure that we will be accepted by the mainstream? That sentence, that statement really struck me. And I was talking to myself and say, if this person, being a third-generation Chinese American, a person who does not have a choice of going back to the motherland, would think like this, how would my children and my grandchildren feel about this? I want my grandchildren 20 years, 30 years sitting here and still say that, are we accepted by the society? And therefore, from that day on, I say, we have to do something. And I come to a conclusion. The only solution is to get involved. Now, when I say get involved, I'm not saying that everybody should be running for city councilman. No, but it's as simple as you should, for example, join the PTA, the Parents Teacher Association. Many good school districts such as South Pasadena, San Marino, when you look at the number of Asian students, and then at the PTA meeting, you go there and take a look at the number of the parents, you will know what I mean. And this is what I call getting involved.
Thank you. Dr. Suzuki.
My involvement, I think, was strongly influenced by my experience in growing up in the United States. As many people know, Japanese Americans were imprisoned during the war into camps in the deserts of the United States. I went through my first 3 years of schooling in one of those camps, and that influenced me later in life to become very involved in the civil rights movement that was started by African Americans. And I really became very deeply involved in the African American community at that time. This was in the 1960s. But as I was working in that community, some African Americans said, "Why aren't you working in your own community?" They are not involved in the civil rights movement. And so I thought about that, and I said, you know, they're right. We need to really get the Asian American community involved in promoting human rights. And that led to my deep involvement in the Asian American communities. And I'm pleased to see people like Councilman Z running for political office, because if you look across the spectrum at the numbers of Asians in leadership positions in our society today, they are very small in number. I am only one of 4 presidents of four-year institutions across the country. There are over 2,500 four-year institutions, and there are only 4 of us who are presidents. 5% of the faculty in higher education are Asian Americans, but less than 0.5% are presidents or chancellors of these institutions. You can look at any sector, politics, look at the corporate sector. We are severely underrepresented in leadership positions. So one of the things that we've started at Cal Poly Pomona is to run leadership development workshops for Asians in higher education, to encourage them to go on for higher level administrative positions. And this is beginning to happen in other sectors, like in the business sector. There's an organization called LEAP that you're probably familiar with that runs training workshops of this type. I think more of these kinds of workshops need to be provided, but while it's important for more Asians to get into leadership roles, I think we never should forget that we have a mutuality of interests with many other groups. We owe a large debt of gratitude to the African Americans who really started the civil rights movement in this country. And so I look at it from a very multicultural perspective, and I hope we can continue to promote that perspective.
Thank you. And both of you mentioned about getting involved and reach out. I think use yourself as an example, as a role model here. Thank you.
在中国古老的教育哲学里，当然要推崇《礼记》里面的学记。学记上最有名的一句话：“建国军民，教学为先。”这是说建立一个政权，建立一个国家，统治这个百姓，哪一桩事情最重要？教学。只要把教育工作做好了，所以教育是防范，叫人不会犯罪，犯了罪以后再加以处分，那是司法了，那是后面的了。是如何叫人不犯罪，如何叫人能够相亲相爱，这是人文教育。今天的社会会变成这么乱，我们不能说教育不发达，不能说教育不普及，那这原因到底在哪里呢？过分着重于科技工商的教学，把做人的道理疏忽掉。人与人到底是什么关系？人与自然环境是什么关系？人与天地鬼神是什么关系？这个疏忽，所以问题出来不知道人与人的关系，就产生了人与人的冲突；不知道人与自然环境的关系，我们就破坏自然的生态，所以地球就生病了。不知道人与天地鬼神的关系，就宗教就互相冲突了。所以中国古老的教育，它重点是教人这3桩事情。这个3桩事情解决了，畅通了，人才能真正达到幸福美满。才真正知道人与人之间不分国家、不分种族、不分宗教， 它能够互相尊重、互相相亲相爱、互助合作。所以看中国的历史，几千年当中，中国虽然有战争，从来没有把战争在别人国土里进行过，所以这是一个和平的种族啊，从来没有侵略别人的，在历史上没这个记录。啊，只有内部改朝换代，那个皇帝不好，被人推翻了。推翻之后啊，不会超过5年，是这个社会又安定。它就是这种文化的力量，这种教育的力量所造成的这个成绩。那么今天中国这个会演变成这样，是我们中国自己把老祖宗这个教学的理念、教学的方法失掉了啊！我们丧失了民族自信心，完全吸收外国的，把自己东西丢掉了，所以今天在遭这样的灾难。那么今天全世界如果要能恢复秩序了，这是70年代英国哲学家汤恩比所说的，要解决21世纪的问题，还是要中国孔孟的学说与大乘佛法。这是个真正有智慧、有见地的人，他才能说得出这句话来。所以我们只把老祖宗东西再捡回来，才能解决问题。
Well, Mr. Kell, before you translate, I'd just like to remind the panelists that we have 3 minutes left for today's session.
The basic principles in ancient China for education is to stress 3 conditions. One is the education on what is the relationship between human and human. The other one is what is the relationship between human and nature. And then the relationship between human and that which is beyond nature. Now, these 3 conditions, these 3 emphases are very important. And in our modern day education, although we can't say we have less education, there are more education today. But what we're missing is that we're missing these crucial 3 factors. What we have right now is an overemphasis on technology, training in technological or even vocational training. So what happened is that people have lose a sense of their own relationship to other human beings while they're becoming more proficient at productions and industrialization. So we think these 3 principles, if we can reinstate them, will be very important to making education more effective in terms of promoting peace. And in fact, if we look at China in the ancient days, there are very few wars and invasions to other cultures. What we have is temporary interior wars where the political power changes. But today, the chaos in China is precisely a manifestation of our own turning our own back on our own culture and turning our own back on the 3 principal education that I just mentioned. And well, in the 70s, there's an English philosopher who said that to really restore world peace, we really need to promote Confucianism and Buddhism, in particular Mahayana Buddhism. So I think what he said, there's something there, and it's really, I agree with that, because in order to promote peace, we really need to go back to our own heart and then understand our own relation instead of focusing education on training for skills and other things.
Thank you very much. I think it was the 2 minutes we left for today, actually 1 minute. I'd just like to invite the panelists to just say a conclusion for today's discussion. Thank you. Can we start with Councilman, please?
Yeah, if I may use 30 seconds to make a conclusion. If you agree with us, getting involved is the ultimate bottom line to solve this cultural diversity or rejections. I would urge you to do something today. If you can serve on the PTAs, if you can serve on the city council or anything, do it today. You have to convince yourself, you have to convince the others that you are part of this community, and actually this is just one community and we are all members of the same community.
Thank you very much. Dr. Suzuki.
I appreciate being invited to this panel discussion. I think the issues we discussed today are extremely important for the future of our society, and I hope that this program will stimulate further discussion in the larger community of these issues. So thank you once again for having me.
Thank you. Venerable Master, just a conclusion.
刚才许市长讲的话非常正确，我们积极参与不同的宗教、不同的社会、不同的族群种种的活动，去了解它、认识它，然后就会热爱它。
Councilman Lee said what he said was really, I'm really in agreement with that. If we can go out and reach out and participate in different religions and different ethnic groups and their activities, then we can have we can make real steps into toward the promotion of multicultural peace.
Thank you.
谢谢大家。
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you for being here and plant the seeds. Thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting us.
谢谢。
Okay.